Recording in progress. Good morning, students. Welcome to week 8 of organizational communication. My goodness, I'm doing the drum roll here for you right now. You're in your final week of this course. I know that you are taking other courses as well at the same time, but I just want to genuinely tell all of you how much I've enjoyed this cohort. There are some excellent writers in this cohort. There are some excellent brains, some fantastic critical thinking that is inside this cohort. There's also a lot of integrity in this cohort, a lot of passion for Jesus and the desire to give away the gospel in various forms, both in churches and in the marketplace. And I get to say that I got to be a part of the spring 2023 cohort that took organizational communication, and it's been a real privilege and honor for me. So, okay, here we are, last week. Let me bring up and share the screen with you. It's always easier said than done when you're over 50. No comments from you guys in your 20s, 30s, okay? My kids tease me enough. My youngest child, my daughter Abigail, is 29. I've got another one Kyle is in his early 30s, and Rachel, my oldest, is about to turn 35. So I we tease each other a lot. We show a lot of affection through teasing. So actually not the slide I want you to see right now. Let's hide that back behind the curtain here. So, all right. Wow, this final week we are looking at organizational employment and the changing landscape as it has to do with working. Remember in week 1, we talked about globalization just a little bit. We introduced some different types of factors that had to do with globalization. Might do you a little bit of refresher to do you some good to go back to chapter 1 in your textbook from Catherine Miller and just look at a couple of the factors that were involved in that, particularly as it relates to globalization. Now we're going to address, how does globalization impact the workplace? Does it impact the workplace? What are the factors involved? So we have 4 learning objectives here to week number 8. And again, our title for this week is Organizational Employment, either is and its changing landscape. So the first learning objective for this week is to develop an understanding of what a globalized economy, okay? Repeat that term. What a globalized economy looks like and how this globalized economy impacts organizations and the individuals who work for them, and I would say even the stakeholders, the internal and external stakeholders associated with these organizations. Secondly, to appreciate the contemporary importance placed on one enriching their organizational image. It's interesting. You can go look back at textbooks, even that are like 4 or 5 years old, on organizational leadership, and very few of them actually address the importance of organizational image. And yet, just in the last few years, organizational image has become so more important. Why? Because of globalization. I don't have the facts to cite for you on this slide in particular, but in some of my research and reading, even in preparing for this particular lecture, it is now stated that this is a crazy number, that 41% of the globe has access to the internet now. 41% of the total population of the world. And at the turn of the 20th century, so 1900-ish, we were 1.7 billion people on planet Earth. By 1960, which is the year that I was born, 1960, there were 3 billion people. So it had nearly doubled in those 60 years. So, I mean, we're talking about the history of mankind all the way back, to Adam and Eve. We had only accumulated 1.7 billion people. And yet from 1900 to 1960, we doubled that from 1.7 billion from all history to 1900. Then in 60 years, we double. We go to 3 million. Then by the end of the 20th century, by the year 2000, we were at 6 billion people. We are right now somewhere in the neighborhood of between 8 and 9 billion people on planet Earth. So you can see how rapidly we've grown. And to think then about 41% of those 8 billion people having access to the internet, you can see why organizational image is a factor now that it used to not be, because the world is smaller and people are more aware of it. You make a public statement now on social media, it might even sit in the cellar for 20 years, and then somebody will research it, find that quote, bring it back out and lay it right in front of you and say, you said this 10 years ago or however many years ago. And so it's never gone if it's on social media. It maybe it's just taking a nap for a while. It's in hibernation. Okay, so we're going to appreciate, again, second objective, appreciate the contemporary importance placed on enriching, not just maintaining it, but seeing if we can enrich it, make it even better, our organizational image. Thirdly, to recognize the shift from a products producing workforce, particularly from here in the US, to a services provided workforce. Amazon Prime would be a perfect example of that now. We're no longer manufacturing things. We are now getting products to people. They many times are being manufactured in other places around the world. There again is the globalization. The product that you buy online right now and get delivered to your home is coming from a Amazon warehouse somewhere near you, or Target, or wherever you're buying it from, but it was probably made somewhere else globally and then shipped all across until it finally ended up in your front porch, and hopefully safe and secured for you to pick it up. Then our fourth learning objective this week is to comprehend the distinction between full-time permanent workers versus what is now considered the contingent worker. I think your textbook even throws around the idea of it being a disposable worker. Nobody wants to be referred to that, right? We might have felt like we had a job that we want to dispose of, but we never want to see ourselves or even the employees that work with us or beside us or for us as disposable workers. So contingent is what I'm going to stick with as the word that we use. So we're going to explore. We've seen what the past has done. We've seen the different metaphors, all the way from the machine to systems to cultures to modern approaches. We've seen all these different variances. And now here we are, and we're looking now at what's the future going to look like. And so while we go in this exploration, I don't know how many of you are aware of Indiana Jones, but both to save you from needing to wear your sunglasses and also for us to just have a little fun, I'm going to wear my Indiana Jones hat, or at least my version of an Indiana Jones hat, as we go exploring the future. Actually, we're going to go, look, we're going to use what we know from the past and look to the future with that. Okay. All right. So I want to show you an image here that was really helpful to me, and I'm going to blow this one up now so you can see it better. You see two different images. So you see the top image is a tunnel vision perspective. Beautiful drive, by the way. I've had a chance when we were over in the United Kingdom to drive on some roads that look just exactly like this. I wish I could say this was a photo that I took, but it was not. But I've been on some roads like that between Wales and Scotland and England. And then also had a chance a few years ago for Lori and I to spend 2 weeks in Ireland as well. We've also had the privilege of spending 2 weeks on a missions trip in the nation of Jamaica. And I grew up in New Mexico, so I've been on a lot of missions trips down in the nation of Mexico, all the way up and down the Baja, from the American and Mexican border at Tijuana, all the way into Cabo San Lucas at the very southern tip of the of Baja, Mexico. Uh, but this top image here, you'll see that it's beautiful, right? I mean, it's incredible. Not only would you want to drive that, but it'd probably be even more fun to just take your time and walk it. You can just see yourself walking down there with your favorite pet, your pet iguana or your favorite dog or whatever it is that you have as a pet. Uh, Any of you have a miniature pig or what have you. And then the lower picture down there you see is a big picture perspective looking from above. Okay. So the top picture, you're not looking at from above, you're looking from one end of it to the other, and it's very enclosed. Beautiful, but it's enclosed. The other picture, thank goodness that we have an overview of looking at it, because if we had that overview before we drove it, it would make us feel a little better about the journey. If you're on that road and you didn't know it was going to snake back and forth like that, it would probably get very frustrating. And I don't know how many of you, when I was a kid, I used to get really severe car sickness. And so I would not have done well on that road at all. In fact, I would have been most of the time out of the car on that trip when I was a kid. Now, as long as I'm driving, I would be fine. But my wife still has a lot of car sickness. But so you can see these two different perspectives here. So let's talk about them. So the top photo is a beautiful road. That's one that I would love to drive someday. The bottom photo is just as beautiful, and I would love to travel on it sometime as well at a lot slower pace. The top photo is lined with beautiful trees beside and even over the top of the road ahead. This road would allow the traveler to simply enjoy the scenery and not be concerned much at all with what is happening outside of this comfortable bubble. The road ahead appears to be easy to see. It could even be said that the road ahead is pretty straightforward and somewhat predictable. The bottom road, the one on the bottom left, would require the traveler to be paying close attention to quick needs to change direction, hairpin turns, unseen objectives around the next corner, and much flexibility. It would make the driver and the traveler feel a lot less confident that they knew what was going to happen ahead of time. The bottom road requires a traveler that they really have to get comfortable with the constant change. And that's part of what we're looking at here in this chapter. Getting comfortable with now being in a workplace environment that is globalized. We've got to get comfortable with the fact that the workplace is now in constant change. And if we know that ahead of time, if we can look down over the top of it, then it's easier for us to comprehend it and for us to wrap our heads around having a strategy of how we're going to navigate it. And the bottom road, as we know, the changes appear to be endless. It doesn't show when it ends. And that's a lot of what it might feel like, even in your own personal career. Like, I don't know what company I'm going to end up working for, or what position I'm going to hold, or even where I'm going to live, or if I'm going to be a brick and mortar location, or if I'm going to be working from online down the road a little bit. Am I going to have a full pension, or am I not going to have a full pension? Am I going to have benefits that I really hope and desire for my family? Am I going to have work-life balance in my career? That's what this eighth chapter, or this last chapter, chapter 14, actually in your textbook, is all about. Let's notice some things that in these two images that can help us understand the changing landscape of organizational employment and organizational workforce. Here's two things both roads have in common. They both head somewhere on their way to a desired destination. And they both have a pattern to them that once we understand it can make the trip more enjoyable, more predictable, and certainly less frustrating. Okay, so how do we apply this changing landscape to our own careers and to our own organizations? Well, let's go to the next slide now. I love this slide here. This is a team working together as a team, and they are putting things out in front of them. They're thinking future. They're looking at where they're headed. And I love the intentionness that all four of them have to this effort. They're all leaning into it. And the gentleman on the left appears to be either the leader or he certainly is the person that is functioning as the presenter. Um, so here's our first objective, our learning objective for this week: to develop an understanding of what a globalized workforce looks like and how it impacts organizations and the individuals, meaning you and I and the others that we work with in our workplace. And so I've got a quote, a couple of them actually, from your textbook here. You'll find this one on page 255, and I wanted to emphasize it. Miller says, if the Industrial Revolution ushered us into the modern era of efficient organization and society, many would say that the Information Revolution has ushered us into the postmodern era where everything moves fast and life is more fragmented and less consistent. The only thing I would add to that, or maybe modify that, and what Miller is saying, is that based off of the image that we looked at last, that if we know that it is a constantly changing landscape, then there is a pattern to that. And it can make life a little more sane. And we can recognize that this new reality is that we're much like on a teeter-totter, if you remember that, or even the pendulum on a clock, that it is constantly moving. But if we lean into that and we get used to that, we can find better balance ourselves while we're in this constantly changing environment. So the more centered we are, and this is where, again, I'm going to say, finding your center in Christ, no matter what the changes that might happen in your organization or even in your own personal career, make sure your center in Christ is solid, and then make sure you have good balance so that you don't get thrown off as balance as easily. If any of you went back and watched the original Karate Kid movie, there's a point there where Mr. Miyagi is teaching young Johnny to stand up on a post out at the sea, and he wants him to jump from one foot to the next and keep his balance. Well, before he was ready for that, he put him out in the sea up to his waist so that the waves would constantly be hitting him. Well, until he got used to it, the waves were knocking him down and he couldn't find balance in that. But once he realized that these waves are coming pretty steady, then he was finally able to set his legs, set his balance, and get used to this rhythm of movement. And once he did that, he didn't get intimidated by it any longer. Um, that's, as I said, that's found in your textbook on page 255. I also want to give you another quote from another textbook. And this is one of the textbooks that I showed you a few weeks ago. And this is the one that is titled Leading Organizations. It's the paperback that I showed you, and the subtitle is Perspectives for a New Era. And on page 17 in that textbook, here's another quote that I want to share with you. As economic integration and societal globalization diversify the world's workforce in new ways, global demographic trends amplify this development. Okay, well, what does that mean? Well, it means that as we keep moving forward, this is one of the patterns we can recognize. That globalization is probably here to stay. If 41% of the 8 billion people have internet, and then we realize that for many of them, that's going to mean it's on some type of a mobile device. And those numbers are going to continue to grow because even as early as 2013, it was stated that 85% of the locations on planet Earth had some place that they could bounce off of somewhere to get access to the internet if they wanted to. 85%. So what's that number like now here in 2023? And we also know that's just going to continue to grow. Humankind's plan is that the internet would be accessible no matter where we are, any place on planet Earth. And with that being the reality, there's a pattern to that. People will get information quickly, they will get it consistently. And the workforce is going to change based off of people having that information. So let's say, for example, and this is just, a real casual example. Let's say somebody's on vacation and they're in the Amazon one of these days, but they have an important conversation that they need to have with their boss at work. And it's imperative that they're on that. Well, they could actually end up on that conference call. They could end up on that group Zoom call from the Amazon on their iPhone or their iPad or whatever it might be, maybe while they're on that boat going down the Amazon. That kind of thing was unthinkable before, but now it's becoming more and more of a potential reality. So here's the rest of the quote. As in the past, workers continue to migrate to employers. With global integration, however, employers are now also migrating to find workers. As a result, people from diverse backgrounds with diverse human capital and diverse expectations are increasingly encountering one another in the workplace. On page 257 of your textbook, Miller lays out the 5 primary types of organizations in this global marketplace. The first one is domestic, and that one makes a lot of sense. It's one country and predominantly one culture. I would even say one language. Okay. So, as an example, let's say that it is a small business that is up in Maine, and it's a local inn there. And everybody that works at this local inn is from there, and they've all been there from the time they were kids. And so it's one culture in one nation, most likely, again, as I said, speaking the same language. That would be a domestic culture. But you could say the same thing about that small restaurant in Thailand or in Seoul, Korea, in South Korea, wherever we might happen to be. I have a really good friend that is from Nagaland, India. It's up in the northeastern corner of India that is up near Thailand and some of the other nations that are in that corner of the world. The second type of global marketplace is a multicultural marketplace. And this is when it's one country, but there are more than 2 or more, let's say, cultures that are involved. So it's one nation, but there's 2 or more cultures. That would be probably incredibly common nowadays, right? It's difficult with me living in California to think of an organization that would be just domestic here in California. At minimum, they would be multicultural. It might be in one country. We might only be dealing with a product or a service that is only impacting the local town here in Manteca, California. But I guarantee you there's going to be more than one culture involved internally and externally for the stakeholders. And then the third level is multinational. And that means that there's one nationality, but there are several countries involved. Okay. One nationality, but several countries. So maybe it's a product that gets shipped from one of the Pacific Island nations and it gets shipped to several countries, but it's really still based off of one nationality, one focus people group. My son, who was able to spend a lot of time in Thailand over the years, one of his best friends lives in Thailand, and so he travels back and forth from California to Thailand as often as he can. And there are some products that they are happening among multiple nations that get transported, but it's really one nationality. That it would be people from Thailand that live here. that have that culture as their predominant culture. And so some services or products are being shipped, and they would be the only ones that would either know about it or really be interested in the product itself. The fourth level is international, and that is when we're talking about two or more countries, but we're talking about a distinct culture among these two or more countries. And then fifthly and lastly is globalization or global. And that means we're talking about two or more countries and two or more cultures. Okay. Now let's talk about convergence and divergence. Your textbook addresses this a little bit. I think actually Miller does a great job with it, but I'm going to supplement that with some material that's coming from another textbook as well. Convergence really defined is it means that an organization adapts their practices to match a global market. Well, that would be true of convergence and divergence. They're both adapting their product or their services to a global market. Okay. So I'm just going to use something simple that we know is all over the world, and that's the organization known we know as McDonald's. That there is a McDonald's. It's hard be hard pressed to think of a nation somewhere where there's not a McDonald's there. And so in convergence, the parenting company is the central designer and decider. They control the standardization of the structure of the organization. Okay, so the structure would be the procedures, the policies, the rules, the owner's manual, the operator's manual, those kind of things. So in the convergence organization, even though they're global, the central headquarters is still making all those policies and procedure decisions. So the structure itself remains the same no matter where it's at. So if that were the case, then that would mean that the McDonald's that you would walk into in Denver, Colorado, or Los Angeles, California, would operate exactly the same way in Seoul, South Korea, or in Thailand, or Tokyo, or in Brazil. Okay, that would be an example of convergence. One central headquarters is still deciding all those policies. Now, it could also be an organization that is from another nation that has brought their product or their services over here to the US, and it would work the same way. Their design from their home headquarters mandates how it will operate even when it's in another culture and in another nation. Probably the only variance they would have would probably be language, the written language, the spoken language, things like that. Also, in the convergence organization model, the communication is utilized. So, organizational communication itself is utilized within the organization to relay necessary resources in the form of information, product supply, organizational knowledge, organizational know-how, training, all those kinds of things. And it's simply going to be relayed. They're going to communicate it. They're going to send it. Everything from the French fries at McDonald's all the way to how you're supposed to operate the French fry machine, how you're supposed to operate the coffee maker. All those kinds of things would still be controlled and centralized in a convergence model of global organization. The examples, as I said, would be McDonald's. So whether it's Thailand or Sri Lanka, it would operate the same way. The same standard operational, managerial, employee benefits, hours of operation, menu options, all those kind of things like that would remain consistent. Okay. Now let's talk about the divergence global model. The divergence global model is also adapting their practices to a global market. But what's different is they allow the structural flexibility of procedures, policies, practices to be adjusted or modified to suit the national, regional, and local operating context. And I don't think we have to work very hard at thinking that that would make more sense. but there are two models, and organizations have the freedom to run theirs how they choose to. Um, the same parent company in a divergent model, so again, we'll use the example of McDonald's, is still running everything. They still are deciding many things, but strategically, they're adjusting to be more effective and more efficient within that particular global context. Example of that might mean that they offer something on the menu in Thailand, like fresh pineapple, that they wouldn't offer somewhere else. The bananas in Thailand. My son's told me about all the different fruit in Thailand, where you're going to offer something like that different than what you would offer maybe in Carson City, Nevada, right? So that would be an example of adjusting it, adjusting the policy. In that case, would be adjusting the menu. And there might be some other things in some parts of the world that you wouldn't put on the menu. So not just would you add something, but maybe something that you say, you know what, it's not going to work to offer that here. They're either not going to want it or they're not going to like it, or it's so good locally here that it's not going to do us any good to put it on our menu. Okay. And then a quote that I have here from you from your textbook on page 159 from Miller regarding divergence. She says, it is emphasized cultural distinctives, exploring how meaning is constructed in various cultural settings. So we're trying to create meaning with our organization. We want to make the local people in that region of the world know that we're paying attention to their unique desires, their unique needs. How do they want the product? How do they want the supply? How do they want that service? What would be the best way to help them with that product or with that service? And then making those adjustments accordingly so we can, if you will, dial it in a little better and make sure that our frequency is a stronger connection with the local needs of the community. And also, I would say, I think Miller addresses this in your textbook, that if there's a divergence approach, it certainly will come across to the locals as if you're interested a little more than just making a buck off of them. They might actually be interested in bringing an asset to their nation rather than just trying to get money from the local purchasers, the local consumers. Okay, now after covering both convergence and divergence global models, some organizations will actually take a combination of both, would also make sense. And to varying degrees and varying combinations. So they put together their own recipe, if you will, on how it's going to work for them. And that really seems to probably make the most sense to me anyway, based off of there might be certain aspects of the structure of the parent organization that they find out at that local location there isn't going to be as efficient and as effective. So they're still going to have the headquarters approach to that. They're still going to use convergence for those things. But then other things, they're going to make adjustments to make it locally. One of those would be pay. One of those would be work hours, operational hours, a location, maybe even the design of the building. Because of special needs in tropical places around the world or arid places around the world, where maybe an outdoor seating area isn't going to be, as valuable up in Nome, Alaska, as it would be to have the seating to be inside, right? Okay. The goal for both the convergent and the divergent remains the same, and that is that they want to operate effective and efficient branches of the parent organization that keeps the overarching purpose and objectives. In the divergent model, they're going to make sure that they marry that to the needs of the local people in that area as well. All right. And that's also coming from one of the other textbooks too that I've showed you before, Armstrong and Taylor's book, Armstrong's Handbook for Human Resource Management, and coming from page 78 there. All right, let's go to the next slide. Learning objective 2, Appreciate the contemporary importance placed on enriching one's organizational image. Well, the slide that I picked here for this, I thought was appropriate because you're trying to take everything you've learned over these 8 weeks and how does it all fit together? Over here on one side, we've got looking at the baseline factors. We want to stay in business, so we've got to be fiscally sound. But we also want to have fresh ideas, and we want to do it in collaboration. And so over here on this side, we're showing that we've got teamwork and that we've got a feedback cycle so that we can have various forms of helpful feedback. We also want to stick with the vision, and we really, really need to have teamwork. Over here, we need to make sure all the puzzles fit together, but there are still some aspects of making sure that we've got some kind of orderly design of how we operate, some form of chain of command so everybody knows who they report to. Well, with all those factors being involved, more than ever before, organizations are working at developing a positive self-image for their external stakeholders, and the general public. And your textbook refers to this as with the term known as organizational identity. And this means that you're organizational strategically communicating in the marketing, in their advertising, in their social media, what gets said, what doesn't get said, what gets posted, what doesn't get posted, and any kind of public relations statements as we looked at when there might be crisis intervention necessary that might cause us to need to adapt suddenly to something. How we word it is not going to just show up in the front page of the local newspaper anymore. It's going to go all over the world when we make a public relations statement, especially if it goes out on any kind of social media forum. But regardless of where they stand on local, regional, or national relevant issues, they still need to make sure that they're paying close attention to being true to why they opened in the first place, which means, again, why that needs to be vetted. Why do we need to brainstorm making sure that we're staying on track about why we open in the first place? What does success look like in relationship to our initial vision? What help do we need in order to make sure that we are getting the outside input, that we don't have groupthink happening within our organization? And are we really collaborating where we are thinking this through so that we've got a strategy that has been vetted in making decisions? And so certainly all of these factors would play into an organizational image. I would say that LPU, I love that LPU does not apologize that we are a Christ-centered institute. I love that. They have made sure that from the beginning that since the school opened and continually here in 2023, we do not apologize that part of our organizational identity is that we are Christ-based. Many of you chose LPU simply because of the fact that they make that stand. Other people may not pick LPU for that reason, but in the process of them going to LPU, they meet Christ, or they can become, at minimum, Christ curious by the time they finish going through the process of their education. This also means that organizations promote themselves to be increasingly invested in key issues. And I'm just going to name a few of those. One would be protecting our natural earth environment, going green. If that matters to an organization, then they're going to lean into that. And the products they use, the recycling that they make available to the consumer is going to be a factor played into that. How their products are received, how their products go out the door are going to play into that if they're wanting to make a public statement and a public stand that we are a go green organization. And as you know, many people will decide to be loyal to an organization even if their product is more expensive or their service is more expensive. They're weighing, I can get it delivered from this company or from this company. Well, this company really leans into a concern that I really appreciate. So knowing that, I am going to lean into this. When I went and got my graduate degree, I know there were places I could have gone to school and gone a little bit cheaper than LPU, but LPU had what I was looking for, and I was willing to pay more for that because of what they stood for. And again, I love the fact that they didn't apologize. So when you're going through the vetting process and all these things we're looking at on this slide here, if you're really confident that you're on target with what you really want to present, then own it. Don't be ashamed of it. Don't apologize for it. I would say the same thing for you and the community that you're in as a Christ follower. We may not be out there saying you're going to hell if you don't know Jesus and screaming and yelling at the street corners, but at the same time, we don't want to apologize for the vetted process of why we came to the faith that we have. Okay. Another example would be addressing the continued increase of homelessness, depending on what part of the nation you live and whether or not that's for you or your organization, if that's something that they want to make sure that they invest in and contribute to. Affordable education, that's one that I care about. I know my friends that are over in the UK don't pay to go to college. Yeah, you heard me right. They don't pay to go to college. If you live in Great Britain, you're able to go to school. It's incredible. There might be things that you pay for that are connected to it, but you and I have to look at going thousands of dollars in debt unless it is paid for in some other way for us here in the United States for us to go to school. And so, I'm always interested in an organization that is working hard to provide affordable education. Another one would be the ability to read, that we can stamp out illiteracy and make people feel really valued. One of the things that tags my heart when an adult can't read, just think about it. They can't fill out a job application. First of all, they might not be able to read it, but even if they take it home and have a relative fill it out for them, they still can't come back in and communicate anything else that's being handed to them literature wise. Put yourself in that position. None of us in this uh, Zoom room have to face that on a personal level. But can you imagine how devalued you might feel if you don't know how to read, and yet as an adult, maybe you're ashamed to tell anybody. So that's a that's a that's a social issue that matters to me. Is being able to provide a safe place with consistency to help people achieve the capacity to be able to read. Because I feel like when they learn how to read, they just learned a language. Uh, we might be speaking English, but you speak another language if you know how to read and write. Another one would be domestic violence. Having two daughters, that's a big one for me. If I hear about a woman or child getting slapped around or abused in some way, yeah, domestic violence is an important thing. So if I hear an organization is doing something about that, that matters to me. Human trafficking. If I hadn't been a pastor for the last 33 years, I would have invested my life into stopping or reducing human trafficking in some way. And I would have felt like I'm just as much in ministry of doing that as what I'm doing now. Uh, the seventh one that I have here is career opportunities for U.S. veterans, whether they're coming home with PTSD or whether or not they've lost a limb or the capacity of a limb, or uh, their eyesight or their hearing or whatever it might be. Man, I can never salute enough or give enough honor to someone that has gone and stood on watch in the middle of the night somewhere around the world so that I can sleep safely in my bed. That matters to me. And then eighth, right here, I listed something that is a real current big deal that we're seeing happen globally, and that is refugees that are seeking asylum from nations that are being run by warlords or dictators. Uh, Mamas trying to get their babies off the ground in a nation where your child might be forced into, carrying a machine gun at 6 years of age, or just be seen as a waste of food that they need for the soldiers, housing, not to mention the abuse, the domestic abuse that could happen by someone that feels like guerrillas, that are armed guerrillas come through their community that are threatening the lives and the safety of people in those places. If I was a parent, I would find a way to get out of the nation too. Um, I know that Jesus is concerned about that kind of thing. So simultaneously, organizations need to continue or even improve in providing services that are effective, efficient, and high quality and important to the consumer, while also paying attention to their public image and anything that they can do to be a contributor into the one or several ways that their organization wants to contribute to the things I mentioned eight. There's probably 800 that we could mention that would be worthwhile here. Okay, let's go to the next slide. Customer service. That's the next issue that is seen in this particular chapter by Catherine Miller as being important in this new era that we are in. Is your textbook says that we are now at a place where, what is it, between 80 and 90%, I believe, are the stats of what we have moved to becoming service industry. And I saw that the research that she and her team had completed that said that prior to World War II, the industrial age era, and prior to World War II, that it was somewhere like around 10% that we used to be farmers. So we produced something, we made something. When the Industrial Revolution era came, we started making telephones, we made airplanes, we made trains, we made the automobile, we made steel, we shipped products across the country. So we had to find ways to do that. And so we were a production, we were designers, we were inventors, we were engineers in many, many ways. And we were a nation on the verge of moving across this entire continent. And there was a need for invention pretty much at every turn. And now it's interesting. I was actually surprised by those stats to see that we are so dominantly uh, involved in participating in being a consumer service oriented society. I don't even know what I think about that, but the stats are real. Customer service. Yeah, we've moved from making trains to delivering whatever somebody might want to eat for a dessert right to their door. That's the way we have become. In your textbook, Miller says this, and this will be in page 262 and 263. In the years following the Industrial Revolution, most organizations counted the creation of things as a primary goal. At the end of World War II, only 10% of non-farm jobs were in the service sector. Today, dot, 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 it can be largely characterized as a service economy, dot, dot, dot. The shift to a service economy, dot, 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 is about 90% of the US economy nowadays. What are some examples of that? Well, Amazon, I mentioned them. Whatever you desire, you can have it delivered right to your door, not only by setting on your front porch from a vehicle that drives up, but in a little town not too far from where I live, a little town called Lockford, Amazon is using it as a test location for them to expand the capacity for customers to have a pad built on their property with specific parameters that they have to use. To have a pad built on their property where Amazon drones can land on their property and deliver their goods and services. Wow. I Yeah, I guess if I was on an island somewhere and I could have that done, to have stuff delivered, that'd be pretty cool. I don't know that I need to do that in my backyard. My German Shepherd would eat it anyway. Another example of that would be Grubhub and some of the other organizations that deliver meals to our homes. Target and Walmart have drive-up service or even delivery service for you to get your groceries, prescriptions, same thing. During COVID, a lot of that increased greatly. My mom is 84. She will be 85 in a short period of time. And she still doesn't quite believe me when I tell her that we can have her medications and her groceries delivered to her front door. And she says, well, you know what? I still like to get out of the house. It's one of my only things that I can say I get to enjoy doing now that your dad has graduated to heaven. So I say, you know what? I get it, Mom. So she's, even though she's 84, she doesn't want her groceries delivered to her house. Another example is home warranties, the services. Lori and I had our hot water heater die and leak all over our garage and run a bunch of things in our garage, but we had a service warranty. Our service warranty came out. They provided the new hot water heater was paid for by our service warranty, which crazy is only like $50 a month for a service warranty. They completely paid for the hot water heater to be delivered, match the quality of the one that was already there. It cost us the money of the labor to have the gentleman come out and put the new one in, but we didn't pay for the hot water heater. That's a service provided by home warranties. What about Uber and Lyft? It's not just a taxi anymore. You can have somebody come pick you up. Uh, my wife and I went and got to tour the Dallas Cowboys football stadium in Arlington, Texas, and the person that picked us up, I paid a flat fee, which I thought was very reasonable. They showed up in a black Cadillac Escalade and took us all the way out there, 45 minutes each way. And I was like, okay, that was my money's worth on that trip. Next one is Home Depot. Here's an example. You could go there, pick out what you want built on your back deck, and they will come over to your backyard and build it for you. Costco will connect you to Sunrun solar panel company. And so all you have to do is go shop in Costco. And the next thing you know, Sunrun's going to come out and put solar panels on top of your house for you. Costco will also set up my oldest daughter and her husband didn't get to take a honeymoon when they got married a few years ago. They had to go straight back to school and straight to work. They were both going after their graduate degrees at the time. So they just got to take their honeymoon just here recently. And through Costco, they bought an all-inclusive destination vacation in Puerto Vallarta, Mexico. And they went down there and stayed for 10 days and talked to a number of people that were from Europe that paid thousands of dollars more because they didn't go through a company like Costco to provide it. So here you are in Costco. You walk in there for me, and I don't own stock in Costco. I probably would love to, but I can go in there and get my glasses. I can go in there and get my hearing aids. I can go in there and get my prescriptions. I can go in there and get my groceries. I can order my solar panels. I can also order plants that I want to have planted in my backyard. I can have a deck built on my backyard through the suppliers that they provide. I can buy a new car through Costco and go through their system. I can buy new tires, whatever it might be, and also I can walk out the door with a pizza. So you see what I mean? Organizations today that are doing well and thriving, they're providing a service, not just a product. The old days, you went to a grocery store, they had a product. You bought the product, you come home. Now, the grocery stores and the other competitors with grocery stores, they provide multiple services for you. You're not going there and just getting that one thing, that one product that you're purchasing and taking back home. All right, let's go to our next slide here. This is our last one. The contingent workforce. I would imagine that most of you are wrestling with this, and a very sincere heartfelt statement I want to make here is that because you're in the same, many of you in the same bracket that my kids are age-wise, or even younger, some of you, and I'm sorry. I'm really sorry that your job market right now in our nation doesn't offer you the regularity of finding a career where it's going to give you a pension, that you can work for the same company for 30 something years and get full retirement. That the term contingent workforce is a reality is one of the things that, as a dad, makes my heart ache for you. And yet I love that all three of my kids are not nearly as sad about it as I am, because for them, it's their reality. And I know for many of you, it's your reality. Well, this is our fourth learning objective, to comprehend the distinction between full-time permanent workers versus contingent workers. So let's address the term contingent workers. It means workers that do not have a permanent or full-time employment. And that means that it usually is without PTO, meaning paid time off. It's usually without health insurance. It's without retirement or pension or many of the other benefits that you would hope that they would have. Some of the companies that are the opposite of that, I think I mentioned to you in an earlier lecture, is that Google knocks it out of the park. I mean, that's the reason so many people want to work for Google. They even provide childcare on the campus for parents. They have places where during your lunch hour, whenever that might be, you can go take a nap if you want to. Um, they have places to exercise right on the campus so that when you're starting to get brain fog on your break, you could go into their exercise room and, get on the treadmill or on the stair stepper or, the stationary bike or whatever it might be. But there just aren't that many comparatively, the jobs that are out there. And as we're talking about the population growth, the companies that are even trying to do a good job of taking care of their employees don't have the capacity to provide the full, uh, uh, wagon load, if you will, of assets and benefits that maybe they would like to. And also with minimum wage continuing to go up, many employers are having to pick between being able to make the minimum wage level of paying their employees or providing lots of benefits. And I know, I have friends of mine that own and run small businesses, and it actually, they're Christ followers, and it bothers them that they can't provide more benefits for their employees, or the permanence that their employees would like to have, especially regarding things that matter now to your generations and your culture, of work-life balance. We boomers didn't get it. We thought that we loved our family by just working all the time. And our kids told us as they got to be teenagers and adults, we would rather have had you around more, Dad. I mean, after 33 years as a pastor, that's part of what my kids tell me now, and it breaks my heart that I wasn't around as much. Well, the younger generations, you guys get it more and you want more work-life balance. In fact, you will often trade off other benefits or even pay in order for you to have more work-life balance. And I admire that. I really do. Some people are contingent workers by choice. They like that. They like the mobility. I know one example of that are travel nurses. With my wife being an RN, there are travel nurses that they don't want to work in one place for one company. They like the fact that they can take a nursing gig that they're going to be in another part of the world or another part of the country and work there for a few weeks. And then they will leave then and go somewhere else and work in another location, and they love it. Well, if I was young and single, I think that would be fun too. So some people it's by choice. Other people, it's not by choice. It's simply those are the best opportunity that they have found. And so a term that is also out there now that you are aware of, and that's just called perma-temp, that I'm constantly temporary at whatever job I'm in. A friend of my son's recently told me that with his generation, that they see themselves that it would be normal and average for them to be working for somewhere between 5 to 10 different organizations over their career. And some even say, well, that's minimal number of how many we would work for, but it is what we're facing. Most young adults, 18 to 38, let's say, do not anticipate a long career in one company that offers the things I mentioned before: full pension, excellent healthcare plan provided for by the company, or at least most of it, dental, optical, and 2 to 4 weeks minimum of paid time off, not to mention bereavement pay, or sick pay being added on top of that. And so I would say to all of you, pay attention to that. I'm now at 62. I did not pay attention to that kind of thing at a younger age. I implore you to look for those kinds of opportunities if you see one. If at all, it's a good fit for you. And so on this last lecture now, I want to pray for you. So I'm going to stop the share screen here, and I want to pray for you. I feel like a little bit like I didn't realize, but I feel like Gandalf the Gray here, in this hat, and my beard here. But Lord Jesus, thank you for these students. Thank you for the privilege and the opportunity it has been for me for these last 8 weeks to be a part of their lives in some way. And I want to extend to you, Lord Jesus, and also to these students as well, that if any of them need to text me or call me for any personal help, advice, encouragement, whether it be scholastic or in their own personal lives, that I would be able to be an asset in their lives, that we have now met and that I'm available, and that vice versa. If in any way that any of you as students know that I might need your assets and your help in some way, that you would reach out to me. In the mighty name of Jesus, let this last week be incredible closure for these students as they continue on that journey towards their bachelor's degree in organizational management. Bless you guys. I will see you online. Bye bye.